Hey everyone, Sophie here from Hey May Blog. Today, instead of doing a blog post, I'm going to be doing a blog video. This video is going to be about my succulents, more specifically how I repot them. Now, I started my little succulent collection several months ago back in summer, and I've steadily been adding to my plant family since then. I've already repotted a couple of these several times now, so I've picked up a couple tips and tricks along the way that I'd like to share with you. So you'll see things such as what kind of soil I use, how much of each different type of soil I use to make sure that I have a mixture that's going to give my plants the right nutrients. You'll see what I look for in pots, and you'll just get some arrangement ideas in general. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the video and let's get started. Okay, so to start you are going to need to get all of the things to make your soil. Now you can just buy regular cacti, succulent, potting mix. They do sell that, and the reason it's just for those plants is because it has a high sand content in it. But I like to create my own mixture, my own soil, just so that I'm reassured that it has what I think my plants need and that my plants are getting extra nutrients from other soils. To start, I use this cactus, palm, and citrus potting mix. This is the mix that I was just talking about. It has a lot of sand in it, which is really good because it doesn't hold too much moisture. It helps it drain faster, and I just use the brand from Miracle-Gro. Next, I use this vermiculite, and this is an organic kind, but you can find vermiculite in pretty much any plant store, garden, shop, center. And I just use vermiculite for more aeration and better drainage. Next, I just use regular potting soil. I'll talk a little bit more later about how much of each of these mixtures you're going to want to incorporate when mixing your own soil, but I use regular potting soil just because it does have a little bit of moisture in it, and this helps my plants not become too dry, and it does have a lot of nutrients for my plants, so I just like to use it anyways. I also use perlite, and I know perlite is not necessarily good for your plants. I use it very scarcely, and again, I just use perlite for better drainage, better aeration, because you can never have too much drainage for a succulent plant. The number one cause of death for succulents is overwatering and plants having too much moisture built up inside. So perlite really helps with this. And then next, you are just going to need a bucket. I just use a regular ice cream gallon pail that we've emptied out, and this is where I do all of my mixing in so that it doesn't get too messy. I also have a garden shovel. This is what I use to mix it and pot it. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you guys know what a shovel is used for. And finally, this is also optional. A lot of people like to use something like lava rocks in their soils to help with drainage. Where I am, I couldn't find any lava rock or stone, and a lot of people don't even just use it for drainage, they actually use it for decoration. So what I found is a lot cheaper and still gives the same aesthetic effect is using aquarium rocks. So there's a lot of different colors of aquarium gravel. You can get it in neon colors, you can get it in single colors like blue and red. I just went for this more natural look, and I just got the natural color stones, and these are what I just set on top of the soil after I've repotted my plants to make it look, well, pretty. So here are the plants that I'm going to be repotting today. Yes, I've named them. So first of all, we have Pepper. She is my newest plant, so she is not even in a pot yet. I'm going to be replanting her from her original container. And next I have Toby. Toby is the second newest member to my family. He has been repotted once before, but he's starting to grow a little bit crooked, and so I want to just get him into a new container. And also I have Albert. Albert was one of my very first plants. He's an aloe vera. I repotted him after I got him at a farmer's market, and since then he has been in this pot. And also I have Josie. Josie is kind of a strange one because she is also just as old as Albert, and since getting her she has grown so quickly. So I want to try to get her into a smaller container because right now she is in a container that, as you can see, is way too large. Succulent roots grow horizontally, so when you put them in a pot that is deep like this, almost all of this pot is being unused. So pretty much that rim around the top, that's about how long Josie's roots are. So all of that underneath the rim is just unused soil. So her roots are focused on growing down and trying to fill out the pot that she's in right now. And I want to see her grow horizontally instead of vertically, and I want her growing to slow down. So she is going to be repotted into a much smaller container. So before I can repot my plants, I am going to need to create the new soil mixtures for them. So I'm just going to use my gallon pail and my shovel to do this. And I start with the cactus, palm, and citrus potting mix. This is the mix that has most of the sand in it. I don't really have exact measurements for how much of each of these potting mixtures I use. I kind of just eyeball it and just go with what I feel. But this particular potting mix, the one with all the sand in it, is the one that I use the most of because it does help with drainage. So I just do a couple shovelfuls of this, and then I use the potting soil next. The potting soil, like I said, has a lot of moisture in it, so you don't want to add too much of it. You want to add just enough so that the plants get the nutrients that they need from it without feeling like they are being overwatered and containing too much moisture. So I do about half as many shovelfuls of the soil as I do of the cacti succulent sand mixture. Next, I add the vermiculite. You don't need to add too much vermiculite. I add maybe 1 or 2 shovelfuls because, again, this is just for aeration, so you don't really need too much of it because you are also using the perlite, which is also for aeration and drainage. So I do maybe 2 shovelfuls of perlite as well as vermiculite for the drainage purposes. And then I just mix that all together in my pot until it is thoroughly mixed through and evenly spread out, and that is my mixture. Here is the new pot that I'm going to be placing Toby, Albert, and Pepper into because, like I said, I'm going to be planting them together just to make it easier for me to transport them so that they take up less space and so that they don't grow so quickly, because when you plant succulents in a container together, they are all sharing the same mixture, the same nutrients, the same water, so it really slows down the growing process so that you have to repot them less, which I definitely need because I am in college and I don't have pots and soil readily on hand to keep repotting them. Some of the reasons that I chose this pot is that it came with a catch tray. You really should never have a purpose for a catch tray when you are potting succulents, because if water is coming out the bottom of the vase, that means you are giving it way too much water. So this is kind of, I guess, a reassurance to let you know if you are overwatering your plants more than anything. And I also chose this because it has 2 drainage holes, and these are really important. Drainage is honestly the #1 most important thing when it comes to keeping succulents alive, because they do retain so much water that it's much better to underwater them than to overwater them. The reason being because if your soil is way too wet, it will actually rot the roots and your plant will die from basically the inside out. So drainage holes are super important. Before I add the soil to my pot, I like to add a paper towel to the bottom. This is definitely optional. It's something that I just really like to do, so that just in case if I ever do overwater my plants and water is coming up the drainage holes, the paper towel really stops a lot of the soil mixture from draining out the bottom as well. It keeps the soil inside so that my plants aren't losing soil as well as water. So I just add the paper towel to the bottom, and then I proceed to add my mixture into the pot. And when you do this, you're going to want to fill it almost completely to the top. One of the biggest things that you should keep in mind when adding soil to your pot is thinking about making a mound at the top. A lot of people make the mistake of putting too little soil inside of the pot so that your plants are inside, whereas you want them to be outside so that it's easier to access them, it's easier to give them the right amount of water as well. So you're going to want to add your soil until it's pretty much to the rim or mound it. I kind of ran out of soil, some of my soil mixture, so I couldn't mound it as high as I wanted to, but you definitely should. Now that I've added the soil to my pot, I am going to proceed to take the plants out of their old pots. So this process can be a little tedious because you want to be really careful not to rip any appendages off of your plants. So I just grabbed this plastic bowl, and all I'm doing is I kind of tap the pot first on the table just to loosen up any of the soil that may have hardened to the sides, and I just kind of shake it around, and then I very gently grab the plant and I pull it out of the pot. So then what you're going to do is you need to be careful because the roots are very delicate. So all I kind of do is just wiggle my fingers around. I kind of press on the soil so that it falls apart and falls away from the roots. I don't want to tear the soil because I might end up tearing a lot of the roots off with it. And then with Pepper, Pepper was a little bit different because she is a cactus and it doesn't look like it, but she does have needles. So when repotting a cactus, you are definitely not going to want to touch the cactus. And I probably should have grabbed some gardening gloves, but I didn't think her needles would actually hurt me at all because she looks so fuzzy. I did end up getting like a rash after this from her needles, so definitely wear gloves no matter what kind of cactus you're using, whether it looks dangerous or not. Just wear the gloves so that you don't have to deal with the prickly rash like I did. And then with your gloves on, also use newspaper or a magazine or any sort of material that the needles cannot really penetrate, because you're not going to want to touch it with your hands even if you have gloves on, just to be sure. So use the newspaper to grab the plant and kind of wiggle it around again and again. Break the soil away from the roots gently, try not to tear the roots away from the plant. Now that the plants are removed from their old containers, they are ready to be replanted or repotted into their new container. You have your soil in the pot, so before you can put the plants inside, you're going to need to dig a couple of holes with your fingers. So I just created 3 holes just so that evenly spaced, so that each plant had its own little area in the pot. And then just carefully add your plants into the holes. You can arrange them however you want to. I kind of had to mess around with where I wanted each plant to go to make it look the best. And you just kind of have to mess around with which way the plants should face, especially with Toby because he was leaning. It took me a little while to figure out which way he should face. And again, just using the newspaper to add Pepper to the pot, being careful not to touch her. And then came the most pleasing part for me, which is adding the decorations. So again, I took that aquarium gravel and I just gently sprinkled it all over the soil, just so that I was making sure to cover up any of the soil that you could see, just to make it a little more decorative, a little more fun, and a little more pleasing. And these rocks aren't just for decoration, they really do help in drainage, so I definitely recommend finding some sort of rock or some sort of decoration to add to the top, just for reassurance with draining. And there you have it. Those are my 3 plants in the 1 container. They're so cute. Here is the pot, or I guess the bowl, that I am going to be repotting Josie into. What I ended up doing is I actually used a bowl that I made in ceramics class in high school. So obviously there wasn't a drainage hole in it, so knowing that, I knew I would have to be super careful with watering, but it was the perfect size for her, so I decided to just go for it. So again, you're just going to do the same process as before. You're just going to be careful when removing the plant. Josie never really planted her roots in there, so she kind of fell out. That was probably my fault, but again, just wiggling the dirt away from the roots, being careful not to tear any of them away from the plant. And I actually just pulled a couple of the dead leaves off that have been buried in the soil. They were probably actually taking up a lot of the water and the nutrients that the rest of the plant needed, so peeling these away was actually more beneficial for the plant. And then I took the new bowl and I added more of that soil mixture to it. I ended up having to make more for Josie, so I just added that in there. And as you can see, once I made the hole in the pot, I realized that the soil was not mounted high enough. It was not over the rim enough, so I actually had to go back and add more soil to it, and then I had to dig the hole for Josie to go into. So once I had the soil high enough, then I planted Josie inside, and I just packed the soil in to make sure she was in there nice and tight. And I kind of forgot to film myself putting Josie's decorations on, so you don't get to see me adding that aquarium gravel. But again, I did just add a couple sprinkles of that aquarium gravel to the top to help with drainage. And here are the final products. So again, I just planted those 3 in 1 just to help slow down their growth a little bit and make it easier to travel. And then Josie is now in a pot that fits her so that she can focus on growing upwards instead of downwards. And this is my process for how I repot my plants. Keep in mind there are a ton of different options when it comes to repotting plants. You can choose a million different pots, you can choose a million different soil mixtures, you can add as many steps as you want to, you can take away as many steps as you want to. This is just the process that I personally use, that I have found works. None of my plants have died yet, so I take that as a victory. So this is how I repot my plants, and I hope you guys learned something valuable from this, and thanks for watching.